everyone. Welcome. I'm so sorry that we were late, hour and a half late. I hope everyone's having a good morning. Who's up? Who's awake? What is everyone doing? How is everything going? I'm pretty sure I broke a couple of Italian laws, full disclosure, getting here. They didn't want me to get here, but you know what? You got to make it happen. You got to go for the gold. So apologies to the Italian government if I just drove by a whole bunch of policemen. Welcome, everyone. We have a great topic for today. How's everyone doing? If you're here, I want you to go into the chat and tell me your name and tell me what is one of the wildest things you've ever done to get to a location. I'm not saying that that's applicable to today, but I want your name and I want the wildest thing that you've ever done in a sentence to get to a location, and what was the location you were trying to get to and why. I want to hear everyone else's crazy stories. I told men to put in the chat that I got gobbled up by the snowman. Yeah, I changed my house. That's correct. I did. Marwayne, I changed my house. So I essentially drove 4 hours to Bormio. So I was in Predazzo yesterday for the ski jumping, which was a wild event. And then this morning I went to Bormio, which basically it's the same trepidous, malevolent drive as before. And I got to see in full daylight the trek that I made the day before, which I was kind of glad the lights were out, honestly. So I came all the way over to Bormio and they were shut down on the south side. So I basically think of Italy like a boot. And I did like a lap around the boot to come in from the north side, but it worked. So we're here. So this is the new house that I'm in just for today and tomorrow, because I'm going to be going to men's slalom. By the way, if anyone has a pun or a link of how you can relate slalom to sales, I'm out. Ski jumping, I did a short video, which I'm going to put up tomorrow on how to make the jump from SDR to AE naturally. But slalom, I have no pun. I don't even know what that means. So if anyone has a pun for men's slalom and how you can link that to sales, I would be very, very appreciative. So here we are. This is going to be one of the biggest, meatiest topics for sure. So I saved the best for a different house, so to speak, or better Wi-Fi. So we're going to be covering today. I'm already smiling because I think this is going to be my favorite topic. The top discovery questions that every AE should ask and avoid. So this is going to be a two-part series. Essentially, we're going to do two different whole segments on questions, but today is going to be part one on the questions to ask and avoid. So why don't we go ahead and jump into lap one. So lap one, there you go, man. The pizza pie should be center. Lap one is the goal of asking discovery questions to begin with. So in terms of asking discovery questions from a high level, I think we all, for anyone on the line, I'm going to be maybe repetitive here, but the goal of asking discovery questions is to find an unknown. So really diagnose, meaning you're essentially, I would envision it like you're trying to solve the problem that your prospect's trying to solve. So the first thing that you need to do to be, advantageous to your buyer's benefit is figure out what they believe and why they believe it. Like, what do they believe to be true and what is their driving impact? So the driving impact is the only thing that they can't be wrong about, that they want to change something. They can be wrong about everything else. And that's the goal of discovery, is to figure out where, quote unquote, they're wrong. So to help someone, you have to find things that they don't know, or things that they have missed, or things that they're incorrect about. So a good example of this would be, I would call it a misdiagnosis or a missed, kind of both. When I came here and flew in here, or when I changed locations, essentially, I had to get a car to go all the way out to Cortina, and then to go to Predazzo, and then to come to Bormio today, and then to go back to Milan. So I ordered, quote unquote, a car, no crazy travel stories, statute of limitations, smart, J. Frank. You're wise beyond your years. I unfortunately am not wise, and I just admitted that to the Italian government that basically I sped around a whole bunch of cops. Point being, so the example of a misdiagnosis or a misdiagnosis, it actually is kind of both. When I was renting a car, which, keep in mind, I haven't driven or I haven't owned a car in 10 years. I've driven since then, every now and again, but I haven't owned a car because I lived in San Francisco and then I moved out to Paris, and neither location, I mean, it's basically just faster to walk and faster to, Uber essentially everywhere. So when I rented a car originally, and it was cheaper to get a manual. So originally I ordered a manual, not, just thinking like it's not that bad. My dad raised me to drive a stick shift. It made me essentially to be able to drive and to get my permit, driver's permit, he made me learn on a stick shift. So point being, I ordered a manual. And when I went there to pick up the car, the woman asked me a question. And the question was very interesting. And it was a great example of a question where she found an unknown. So she asked me after I had checked in, and she checked my passport, and she's, sized me up a little bit. She says, "Have you driven in snow before?" And I said, "No, I haven't." She said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going to Cortina, and then I'm going to Predazzo, and then I'm going to Bormio." She said, "So the car that you have right now doesn't have snow tires on it. And from a traction perspective, I strongly suggest that you get this upgraded quote unquote car, because if you have to drive through snow, or if you're going hugging around any mountains, it could be trepidous, especially if you're driving at night." And in an instant, she added an extreme amount of value. I trusted her because of, number one, she asked questions, and number two, she was going into a detailed rant. But I even trusted her more whenever I was coming down that mountain and going up that mountain. I didn't think that I was going to be hugging too many mountains. For some reason, in my dumb American head, I was like, everything's flat. So I imagined all the ski slopes and all the sites in Bormio and had mountains, obviously, to be able to have like a ski jump or a downhill. But in my head, it was completely flat terrain from location to location. And I couldn't have been more wrong. I have spent the last few days driving up some of the steepest cliffs and around the most insane turns that I have ever not only driven in my life, but I have seen in my life. So I'll bring up an example. I actually took a screenshot earlier. So here's let me see if everyone can see that. Can everyone see? Yeah, okay, this is just one example of some turns that I was going around. Okay, look at that. That's just one example of like, it was constantly this level for 4 hours. I felt, very, very anxious, not anxious, but I was nervous driving through it. And I was driving very, very carefully. I cannot imagine if I had not had tires that had a lot of traction, I would have been in an even worse spot. Not because, hypothetically, I'd hope it's not because I'm dumb. It's because I just don't have experience with it. I've just never driven in snow before. I've lived in Texas, LA, San Francisco, and Paris. None of those have significant snow. So like, I even had to order a real coat for the first time. So when she asked that question, she helped find an unknown for me. I sort of believed, I'm like, the misdiagnosis that I had was that the terrain was flat, that I'd be driving over. But the misdiagnosis that I would have was that it was going to snow and that I would need a different tire for that. Now, you have to keep in mind, that car was 25 euro more expensive than the former car. And I am unbelievably grateful to her for asking me that question and for selling me that second car. Why? Because there was a problem that I needed to solve for that I didn't know about. The most important thing was there was no pain in the present, right? I had no pain. When I was renting that car, I had no pain. Why? The problem that I hadn't incurred. Yeah, totally. Totally, Kirsten. Like, I was looking off some cliffs, and yes, it's beautiful. But I'm like, and it was that for 4 hours. My legs are sore from holding the clutch for that long period of time. And so the question she asked me was not, what's the impact to you if you're to fall off a mountain? Or, what are the ripple effects on if you can't safely get from location to location, and have me calculate out the cost of inaction? What she asked me was a question that would qualify me or disqualify me from having the future problem that she thought that I would have, and she also thought I didn't know about. The question that I know from a background perspective gave her that kind of confirmation, where she said, "Have you driven in snow before?" And I said, no, I never have. And she's like, I thought so. Like she was thinking that in her head. Now, if I had said, I've driven in snow extensively, and she said, where are you going? And I said, well, I'm going to Predazzo and I'm going to Bormio and Cortina. And I explained through the logic, essentially of why I didn't need this extra car. I didn't even know what the difference are with the tires. What do I know about cars? If people say make and model, what's the make and model? I say, what's the difference? Genuinely, that's my knowledge on cars. And so how she upsold me, there was no pain in the present. When I would have run into that pain it was too late. It was completely too late. Keep in mind, I was coming down one of those hills and I thought that I was going to run out of gas. So it made it even worse. So when I'm thinking about discovery and when I'm thinking about that process of asking questions, she added value quick. I was very aware that she's more of an expert than I am, just based on the first couple of questions that she asked. And man, oh man, am I glad that she bended me this. Man, oh man, am I glad that she asked me these questions and that she saved me from a very dangerous situation. But you have to keep in mind, it was a higher price tag. So the goal of discovery questions is to find all the things that they don't know that they'll run into a negative impact, or there's a tactical problem that they don't know, or a root cause that they don't know, or there's an assumption of theirs that is fatal, that is incorrect. Now, once you find those, if they're still to say, no, but I'm still going to do it anyway, I view it from a doctor perspective. Like you've done your job at that point. Your job is to diagnose things that they don't know so that they have the information in front of them. If I had still been like, no, I got it, and blah, 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 and hadn't taken the product anyway, like that's on me at that point. But our job in that room, I think of the world of if she hadn't asked me those questions, and I have to stress here, that was a more expensive item by a lot. And I am unbelievably grateful to her. So that's how sales should be in an ideal world. The entire time during that discovery portion, if she had then asked me a couple more questions, I wouldn't have been annoyed. I would have been like, ask me anything you want, and I'll give you all of the data you need. Because now I'm like, if she found that unknown, what other things do I know? Oh, here's a great example. She said, after she knew I was going to Bormio and to Cortina, she said, have you ever gone through tolls in Italy? And I said, no, I haven't. She said, how did you plan on tackling that? Or did you have a game plan yet? And I was like, no. And she talked me through the speed pass of I could either buy a pass for 20 euro a day and all my tolls are taken care of and I go straight through, or I can take out cash and fumble through that in Italy for every single toll. And I probably had 5 or 10 tolls, per day so far. So there's another purchase with another upgrade that I'm grateful to her for selling me something more expensive because it was around a problem I didn't know. One example. Here's the crazy thing. Like, I know like these sound like, well, I could see a world where people think are watching this, y'all are watching this and thinking like, okay, that might be that one-off case scenario. But I'm telling you, they are everywhere. That is just one interaction between me and a salesperson. And you have to keep in mind, did I pay tolls on the second day? No. So essentially that's 20 euro gone. I'm still thankful to her though. Why? Because I don't know the process of, I was looking at the line over on the right-hand side of, how do I get over there? I don't have any cash on me. I hadn't drawn out cash. At that point, what do? You can't do Apple Pay at that point. So I would have been hosed if she didn't sell me this thing. There was a whole day where I didn't have any tolls. So essentially it was wasted. But in my view, I'm still thankful to her because overall it was worth it, completely worth it. So let's go into lap 2. I want to stay on time here because I know that we're so late. I'm so sorry, you guys. Okay, what must be found and accomplished when asking discovery questions? So at minimum, the first step that needs to be done, look at that guy. He's famous and you don't even know. Oh, there's his dog. Last night at the place I was in, there was a Bernese mountain dog. I was like, oh, you're home. The mountains are your home. Look at that dog. I think that's a wiener dog. Okay, so what must be found and accomplished in discovery? So at minimum, you need to figure out what do they believe and why do they believe it. But that's, in my opinion, that's not only neutral. If you extract that information out of them and there isn't an unknown, they've just paid the price for a meal that they're not going to eat. So essentially, it was a waste of time, and in a critical moment. So finding out what they believe and why they believe it. Here is a huge myth that I see all over. Sellers believe in their core. And again, I have empathy because it's my job as a trainer. It has been our job as trainers to find something different that actually adds value, but we haven't, over the last couple of 100 years. It's all been very, very nebulous. Find the why behind the why. But so I'm going to take the onus of that. But sellers believe in their core that the role of a seller is to find out their current state information and their future state information to do two things. Number one, to map it to their products and features. And number two, to assess the size of the delta between where they are in solving the problem. But here's the thing. Neither one of those are to the advantage of the buyer. Neither one of them. They're actually to the disadvantage, because the bigger delta they have and that we know about, the more we can vend to them, the more we can hold our guts in pricing, and the more follow-up emails we can send. So our job as a seller is not to justify our pricing through the level of impact that they're going to run into if they don't buy. Because again, that puts them at a disadvantage, because if I'm worried that I'm going to make a mistake, which everyone is to some degree, everyone is. I was hungry for an expert when I came up to that booth because I knew just how much information about that I didn't know. But if I was going to make a mistake, I want to make one cheaply, right? Because it's going to put me, if I make a mistake and it doesn't solve the problem and it costs a lot of money, that puts me in an even worse position, credibility-wise, timeline-wise, capital-wise, to be able to solve it on the back end, what I wasn't able to solve beforehand in an improved state. So it's not our job to, in my opinion, it's not our job to map the products and features to ours, or the products and features to their problem. They can do that themselves, and it's faster, quicker, and they prefer it. Again, 82 to 87% of buyers don't want a seller involved. Why? They can do it themselves. The only thing that they're looking for, it's so interesting to me, of the one data point that sellers often redact, or that companies often redact, is the pricing of a product. And if you really drilled into it and you're like, why do you keep the pricing back? And they're like, because then all my value's gone. But really what they mean is then they don't have to talk to me. And so I can't influence them or persuade them or send them follow-up emails. But I'm like, from their perspective, if there's not going to be any value added, if they're not going to learn anything that they didn't know through the seller, they should check out with cart. It's faster and it's more effective. If you're just going to extract the information out that they already know, why would they go through the process of telling you all that? Why wouldn't they just keep it in their brain and you give me all the information about your products and features and I'll map them myself? Because then I don't need a person, then it slows me down, then I don't have an emotional weight of I've got to tell someone no. So that's the first piece of it. That's not our job. They're more effective at it. And on a side note, if our job was that, I want, think about how well do I really know my product? And to get to know that, go to the product team and ask them how well they think you know their product, your product. So our expertise typically isn't product information, and that's not our job even if it was. So it's not to map their problems to our features and products. They could do that better themselves and more quickly and at their own preference. And the second piece that it's not to extract the information. I'm going to put my butt on the line here. It is not to find that delta of current state to future state, because if it's only stuff that they already know, you have to keep in mind that puts them at a disadvantage. Right now, sales and buyers, selling and buying, buyers and sellers, they're at war. Why? They kind of should be. They're mutually exclusive goals as it is. Sellers are trying to sell as much as they can with as many products as they can at the highest ticket price as they can to hit their quota. Buyers are trying to buy as few products as they can and at the lowest ticket price in order to solve their problem. And so they redact information. The seller hides product deficiencies. Is something really on the roadmap? How much can they discount because of that? And the buyers hide, any kind of budget information they have. Are they really the decision maker? Do they really have urgency? Is there anything else they need involved? Are they looking at competitors? And the level of pain that they have and the level of impact that they see, why they're not on the same team. And going after that information, you have to keep in mind, let's put aside the fact that I don't think that it's worth it for the buyer. It's to the buyer's disadvantage. It is. If they give you that information, and if you reel back and you look at the goal, the real true blue, 3 shots of whiskey deep goal, it's to hold my guts in pricing. And that is not to the advantage of the buyer. If our true goal is to help the buyer, then everything smooths itself out. Their goal, people will be like, buyers lie. And I'm like, yeah. They're like, sellers lie. And I'm like, yeah. They both lie to each other. Why? They're not on the same team. They have different goals. Now, they might not be, like in their head necessarily mutually exclusive. All things being equal, if I can sell you this big bad thing and also solve your problem, okay. But the problem is the order and the priority of that order. That woman had number one on her mind, safety for me. And because of that, I immediately ran the credit card for a almost double as expensive car plus a rail pass. Why? And I was like very thankful in the moment. Now I was hesitant because I'm like, we'll see if this actually does solve my problem. And I'm like, this woman deserves like a Purple Heart. Why? Because when I would have found that out was when I was going around those curves at 1 a.m. on black ice in the dark. But she found those, thank God, because her priority was me. So the thing that needs to happen is that balance needs to be restored. Of their goal is to solve their problems. And they know, they're scared that there are going to be things that they don't know. They know that, like I knew that. I knew that there was a lot of things that I probably didn't know. I told Ben before this started, I'm like, if we manage to make it to every location, I'm going to be shocked. I'm going to think that there's like Olympic gods at bay, just the process of getting location to location, to bus to bus, and like that amount of detail. And I'm like, this woman was an unbelievable element for that for me, even though like hypothetically you'd say, well, she sold me more stuff. Like from the buyer perspective, it's less advantageous to spend more money unless it solves a problem that they didn't know about. So unless we find information that they didn't know about, them giving us their current state and future state in the best, least cynical point of view, it was a waste of time. Why do I need to give you all of that? Do you need the impact? Does it change what you prescribe? So a couple litmus tests that I'd ask myself is, number one, what percentage of the time in discovery is what the buyer believes and what I believe the same? If that's any more than 20%, you have to keep in mind that percentage is the percentage of time that it was not worth it for the buyer to talk to you. And so the questions, I'm actually glad that these questions normally give away the seller's position right away, because then the buyer shuts down right away, because they should. My fear is that they start to believe the seller and they shouldn't, right? So what must be accomplished is I have to find unknowns. Otherwise, best case scenario, it was a complete waste of time. Worst case scenario, I leave that buyer stranded on the side of a mountain because I didn't either update myself, educate myself with the information, or ask the questions to know this girl's going to end up stranded in a mountain unless I find this unknown for her and prescribe something for her, which I can lean in because of the value that she has. Time today, I'm on a rant, and I know it, like, it's not only if I was completely candid, it's the ethics of it. It's the ethics of it. Of like, our buyers at risk, and buyers make the wrong decisions every day, and they get fired every day because we as sellers were selfish. That's what really bothers me. It's an ethics thing of like, why are we going after current state and future state? What? So we can justify pricing? So we can sell them more stuff when we don't even need? They don't even need that stuff? It's still me as a seller. And our job, our responsibility is them. Like, yes, she's upsold me. You have to keep in mind, she saved me from a very bad situation. And I know in my heart that number one, sellers don't want to put buyers in that situation. But in the same time, I know in my heart that they do. And they do it every single day. So the questions always have to be after that pursuit. Not how do I manipulate them or persuade them or influence them? How do I find the things that they didn't know? Okay, let's go straight into lap 3. Tell us please about your experience in sales role or leadership as well. I'm gonna need some clarity, Marwing. What do you mean? My experience in okay, so lap 3. Let's go into lap 3. So the only 2 types of value and only 2 types of questions to ask. I'm actually going to probably abbreviate this lap because I know we're late, and I also know that I've been going a little heavy in the first 2 sections. Okay. The 2 types of value clearly are misdiagnosis and misdiagnosis. Misdiagnosis is something that they believe it's not true. I believe that I wasn't going to drive on mountains, and that's not true. A misdiagnosis is something they've missed entirely. Both of those are value. Both of those, you find one, you add value and create a bigger sale and more trust in you, more credibility. Like all the numbers that you want go up, essentially. So I'm going to get a rattle off the types of misdiagnosis and misdiagnosis. So misdiagnosis, again, this is indicative of, this is something that they believe it's not true. So the first type of misdiagnosis is a false positive. They believe something is a problem when it's not. I believe that this impact is going to happen when it's not. So it's a false positive. The second type of misdiagnosis is a false negative. They believe that something's not a problem when it is. I believe I'm not going to drive on mountains when I am going to be. So that's the second type, is a false negative. The third type is in terms of stack ranking of how well they're doing against, like, let's say their peers. Let's say that I think that I'm doing really bad in sales in comparison with other SDRs or other sales reps, et cetera. So the first type is overranking. They believe that they are doing better than they actually are, or underranking. They believe that they're doing worse than they actually are. Either one is based off of something they believe that's not essentially true. The next one is a boiling point. They believe that the point at which something is going to turn into a problem, let's say that they believe at 40 degrees Fahrenheit. On a side note, I'm pretty sure it's -40 or -42. Look this up, it's wild. At -42 Fahrenheit and Celsius is the exact same temperature. Not that I Google those facts. But a boiling point misdiagnosis is they believe that something is further off or closer than it actually is. So let's say they believe that at 45 degrees is the point at which they're going to have problems in terms of black ice. But right now, they believe it's at 40 degrees, that's when that starts to happen. And right now they're at 45, when really it happens at 42, or really it happens at 35. So a boiling point is they haven't hit the lip of at what point it causes a problem. But what they believe that's not true is the data point of when it does become a problem is the next type. Overdiagnosis is the next type of misdiagnosis. They believe the problem's bigger than it actually is. They believe the impact is bigger than it actually is. And then underdiagnosis, they believe that the problem's smaller than it actually is, or the impact is smaller than it actually is. So it doesn't need to be necessarily you find a whole problem that's unknown. Sometimes it's just the size of it is unknown. And from the ethics view, I've heard people say, or a couple of people have asked me in the past, not many, which makes me feel actually really great. They're like, well, what if their problem, they think the problem's bigger and actually it's smaller, and I find that out for them? I'm like, okay. And they're like, well, but then they won't buy stuff. I'm like, Brendan, I'm going to put you in timeout. Our job is to help them. If that, and I've truly been asked that, even in comments online, I'm like, you belong in jail, Brendan. I can't imagine the amount of people that you have hurt intentionally and unintentionally, but you belong in jail is the punchline. Our job is to help them. If we find out that something's smaller than it actually, no problem. We've still helped them, which is what we say that we're after. So those are the two. Next type of misdiagnosis is underdiagnosis and overdiagnosis. So those are all the types of misdiagnosis. Missed is essentially they have missed something entirely. They're completely unaware of something. So there's only 3 types of these. The first one is just a flat out misdiagnosis, meaning they didn't know something's a tactical problem. They didn't know something's a root cause that they have to solve. Maybe they think, they need to solve email quality. And actually, yes, they do to some degree. To be able to solve their problem, their quota attainment problem, they do have to absolve this. But what they've missed is email deliverability, for instance. But it's essentially a missed item that they have overlooked. The difference is misdiagnosis is based on something they believe. So the key to finding one of these, or the symptom of one of these, is something that they say. They say, whatever it is, they say something and you're like, oh, I don't know if that's true. Like if I'd walk to them and be like, I need this kind of car. I don't need these tires. And she's like, oh, I don't know. Let's see if that's true. Right? So she asks other questions to find out if what I believe is true. A misdiagnosis, your symptom or the key to it is that I haven't brought it up, right? I haven't said anything about this thing. That's your first symptom, that it's missed and they might not know about it. And it might also be a problem. The first step there is that you diagnose that it actually exists. The second thing is that you diagnose that they don't know about it. Right? So I need to find out if this exists. If it doesn't exist, it doesn't matter if they know about it or not. So I don't run my buyers through my line of thinking, just like a doctor. It's too slow, right? So I'm just asking the questions, and kind of one of the keys to this is if you find one early, then it helps them lean in. With buyers, if I don't know them, we've never met before, I have to find an unknown much earlier, just a small data point to get them, and it opens them up to believe of like, okay, I don't have to basically, put this girl out to bay for the next 30 minutes because now I believe that she's going to add value because of this beginning piece. I think a lot about the tipping industry, and I think I brought this up before, but it stands for to ensure promptness. So in the beginning, you tip at the beginning of the meal. So you ensure that your waiter waits on you faster, but now it's flipped to where you tip at the end. So people bartenders, et cetera, don't know who's going to tip them the most effectively. So it reprioritized. They don't know who to wait on the most quickly because they don't know who's going to tip them the most, hypothetically. So this is I view this like in discovery. They don't know who you are, and I wouldn't take offense to that. Meaning it doesn't matter if they don't know who you are, and it also doesn't matter, you have to keep in mind, if they have preconceptions about you. If someone thinks that you're a sleazy seller when you walk in the room, you have to keep in mind that's because of probably a lot of valid things experience and a lot of experience with other sellers. So don't take that. They might be correct, meaning typically they're like, sellers are after, just screwing me over. So when you walk in, that has nothing to do with you yet. If you start to ask all the leading questions, then you enter into that profile. So I wouldn't take offense to it that they are kind of reserved. I cannot tell you, it was really sweet the other day. I went to an SKO where basically someone I had known for a long time, they actually used to work at Outreach back in the day, had known for a long time, went on to an enablement company or run enablement at a enterprise company. And so she essentially hired me for an SKO. And at one point she was like, and she was kind of nervous about it. She was like, do you mind meeting with our leaders basically beforehand? I'm like, I get it. And I'm not offended by it. I'm like, these leaders haven't met me. They don't know me. So, they have some questions of like, who is this person before she goes on an SKO in front of 250 sellers, right? So we do the SKO, and in the middle of the session, I was talking about this data point, and she was just dying laughing, and she raised her hand because I said, an interesting data point to me that you've added value or haven't added value is a lot of people give you a hard stop at the end of the meeting. And all of a sudden at the end of that meeting, they're like, oh, I'll just cancel your fake meeting is what I'm thinking in my head. But I'm like, the percentage of time where they have a hard stop, where at their request or their encouragement, that the hard stop becomes a non-hard stop. They're like, oh, it was 30 minutes whenever I thought you were going to add any value. And again, I wouldn't take the ego hit of like, it's not my fault or their fault that they have that preconception. It's because based on history. But at that top of the hour, they're like, hey, do you have 15 extra minutes? Always really encouraging to me, and a sign that they have actually, they lied to you and we lied to them until they realize that your agenda is to help them and that you have ability to help them. Then they're like, extend the time. So what percentage of the time is that discovery essentially, extending after that? So basically in the SKO, she raised her hand. She said, I did that to you. I'm like, I know you did. It was a really sweet moment that she admitted that, but she had like a hard stop at the end of the hour, or end of the 30 minutes, and she extended it. I say hopefully it's because she found something about it, so she wanted to continue that experience. All of that, we didn't cover the two types of questions. And for brevity's sake, the two types of questions are from a high level. There's only two. Questions that they learn something from when you ask them, and questions that they don't. You need both. People who say, I'm going to get raged for a second. Trainers who say you shouldn't ask closed-ended questions. I'm like, what the, Brendan? Yes, you do. You have to ask some closed-ended questions. Why? For a data point. They're like, man, we've been having really bad network latency recently. It's like, what's your latency? I need to know that. That's a closed-ended question. But there's only two types of questions. Questions where they learn something that they didn't know, and questions where they didn't learn something that they didn't know. You have to have both. Sometimes you have to ask, like for a business problem, for instance, for IT director, what's your server uptime and what's your server uptime goal? I need to ask both of those. They didn't learn anything that they didn't know from asking those, when I asked them those. But, so I need both of those. But how I kind of interdisperse them is I try to find an unknown quickly, and I try to not stack them a whole bunch of things that they don't, like questions where they don't learn anything back to back, especially in the beginning, because they have no they have no experience with you. So they might start to shut down thinking that you can add value because you aren't in that moment. Okay, let's go into the next slide. Okay, next slide. The 13 rules of asking discovery questions. Oh, I meant to bring something up. I'm going to bring something up really quickly. So these are just, you have to keep in mind, these are general tips, just kind of guidelines. So now that we know the goal is to find misdiagnosis and misdiagnosis, at minimum to validate that what they're thinking is correct. And now that we know what business problem, tactical problem, root cause, and impact is, I wanted to go into just some like high level rules that will help you hypothetically in discovery of like, that's the goal. And that's the goal, and that's what those elements are. But here's kind of some guardrails or some tips in terms of asking questions that might help you out in the moment. Okay, so let's start from the top here. So when a buyer says something, you have to ask a question, no matter what it is, especially in discovery, especially at the beginning. If you start talking, they will start shutting down because they should. And I'm saying this just because I have a lot of empathy of like, I do this a lot and I run into a lot of people that do it. So, they say something and it's our temptation to go like, yeah, totally. Or me too. Or here's an example of that. Or, you're like, oh, I'm in Italy for the Olympics. And they're like, oh, I've been to Italy for 6 months too. And it's like, and now we're talking about you. And it's so slight. And I know it's not the intention, but I mean, the short answer is, your job is in the beginning. Well, your job is to find the misdiagnosis and missed. To do that, you need to learn about the buyer so you're able to once you acquire the information. But the second thing you need to do is acquire information within discovery. Yes, generally speaking, people have this, but for them, you don't know if it's true and you don't know the size of it. So that's what diagnosis is. That's what the point of the one-on-one is of like, generally speaking, here are some rules. But I need to know for them in the moment. So neither one of those is achieved. I can't find a misdiagnosis or missed, and I can't acquire information if I don't ask questions. It's, are they talking or am I talking? So people will be like, oh, when they go into discovery, they'll be like, well, you didn't even, like in postmortem, they're like, you didn't even say much. I'm like, well, It's selfish, but I'm after information. Why? Because I can find more stuff. So, like in that game of Guess Who, your turn is asking a question so you can make a more accurate and pristine diagnosis. So, the accuracy of the guess is dependent upon, in this case scenario, in all case scenarios, getting closer and closer is the amount of information you can acquire. Good questions are the ones that help you acquire the most. In that game, if I were to just say, nah, I don't want to take my turn, you ask another question. They get to ask 40, and then I guess instead. That's what talking is in discovery. It's like, no, I don't want any of that. I just want to throw something out there. Even if you're right, it's on accident, and they don't have confidence in you. I've thought about this a lot in terms of waiters and waitresses. When I go out to dinner with my family, which I understand why they feel this way, which it is true for me, but not nearly to the degree. I come from somewhere. Mimi, if you're watching this is about you. If a waiter doesn't write something down, she gets really nervous. And I get it. It's like, even if you do nail it, you make me nervous that you're not. So what's the goal of that? Why not just write it down? So even if you don't ask questions and you nail the diagnosis, it still makes your buyer scared. So why do that and risk the accuracy of that? So if a buyer says something, you have to ask a question, not say something bad. Rule number 2: when a buyer asks a question, you still have to ask a question, no matter what. If they say anything, you have to ask a question. Rule 3: if a buyer mentions a problem, a challenge, or a struggle, you have to double down. No matter what they like. If they're like, we've been having a lot of problem with getting from town to town in Italy. A great default. I'm like, what do you mean by that? There's a number of different questions that you can ask, but that's my shortest go-to is, what do you mean by that? Of like, they might be saying they have been having problems of the trains are delayed. They might be saying they've been having problems because there's a lot of shutdowns. They might be saying they have problems because they don't have the right passes. They might be saying they have problems because the ice on the road. It could be a multitude of things, but I don't know any of that information. Plus, I'm communicating to them that I don't care about that information at all if I don't ask a question about that. So no matter what, if they bring up a problem or a challenge in discovery, I double down there. You have to keep in mind, if your friend came up to you and was like, I've been having a lot of problems with my partner and I'm thinking about getting a divorce. And if you were to be like, okay, well, what do you want to eat tonight? It's like, even if you were after something valid, at that point, it's all about priority of question, not do I ask questions. It's about which one and why. So even if I'm going down a rabbit hole, but they say, man, we've been having a lot of problems with that. And they'll be slight, but they are genuine and they will say it. There is no discovery call that I have seen to date where the buyer wasn't at minimum like overt about what the struggle was for a line or two. But then the seller started talking and then it hit it. No one, I have not seen a discovery call, truly. And I've watched a lot, thousands of discovery calls. I've not watched one where the buyer didn't at least lead them there a little bit, because they're rooting for you, because they're rooting for them. I'm rooting for the woman at the car because I'm rooting for me, right? So when I throw a problem out there, if they don't at least take hold of that and ask or double click, and the most common response I hear from sellers usually is, well, we can help with that. Or, yeah, that's brutal. They try to sympathize with them, which I believe that's fake in my opinion. But I'm like, instead of entering in, not entering in from the emotional perspective, entering in from the diagnostic perspective. If I want to help them solve a problem, I need to know a lot of information. If I want to just hypothetically sell something to them, I don't need to know much. Are you in pain? Do you have a problem? Here you go. Right? And they know that. So anytime they ask mention a problem or struggle, you have to double down. Next rule: any and all questions must be specific. Adjectives and adverbs are the death. High, low, good, bad, struggle. I'll hear this, and again, I'm going to blow up trainers. They're like, we work with people who struggle with their open rates. I'm like, oh my gosh, just give them a number. You have stop training people to do this. You have to be specific. Number one, you're going after a known. We work with people who struggle with this. Are you that? Which you're going outbound, which means they won't solve it. They won't solve it. because they weren't going to beforehand, even if they give you the details, number one. But number two, if I say that they're struggling with low open rates, I don't know what low is. Great example. When I was at figure skating, and somehow, by the way, I can't forget to tell y'all the thing that I was going to tell you yesterday, but I forgot. I told Min right after I got. So I was at figure skating, and for some reason, you just pick your category of ticket, but you don't pick the actual ticket. Like they assign you. You don't know what it's based on. They just assign you a seat, a row, section. You just pick category A, B, C, or D and pay accordingly. And somehow for figure skating, I ended up on the front row, which was insane. You know, I was there for the backflip with Ilya. Insane. Front row for the backflip. I was like, is this a thing? And I'm sitting up there, and there's some heavy hitters up there. Like I was kind of shocked. And behind me, so I'm on front row, and I find out, I'm not going to tell you who they were. There are several people around me where I'm like, oh, you're really somebody. Like you dress people for the Grammys, not like no one like Jodie Foster, for instance, you know. And then behind me, there was 3 people who had an iPad, and it was just numbers. So basically within figure skating, it's not just they land the jump and they land the jump. It's from a technical perspective, there's a certain amount of things that they have to do for it to count as an actual land. So on the big screen, you'll see there's blue dots in the middle of when you're live. It's impossible to see on the TV. There's blue dots in the middle of them as they're giving replays. Sometimes there's a green dot and sometimes there's a red dot. So blue dot means they're still evaluating whether the jump was truly landed. Green means it was. Red obviously means it wasn't. So that's why there's like a 5-minute wait period after they finish skating. So I didn't know any of that, obviously. And so in real time on their iPads, it was giving that, and it was giving which ones were approved and blah, blah, blah. So one of them leaned over, and I thought it was pretty clear that I didn't know figure skating or know anything about this. And they asked me, they said, do you think that they'll skate a 190? Or how many points do you think they got? And everyone starts cracking. I'm like, I don't know. Look at me, 6 billion, 6. They're going to get 4 gold stars. I don't know. Why? I don't even know the point system. I didn't know in the ski jumping, long jump, for instance, it's not just how far you went. It's also from a style view that they get points. So the point is, if they don't have points, how do you get grade? Their expertise shouldn't be, in summary, you can't ask, do you have a low open rate? Do you have high network latency? Do you have slow blank? They're going to answer according to their best knowledge of the answer. But if you're truly going after significant unknowns, by definition, you're going into a territory that they know less and less and less about. So like this figure skating is a great example of that. So if they had said, do you think that they'll get a high score or a low score? I'm going to tell you based on what I know. But the problem is, I'm like, if you know, the only thing, I don't know any living, non-retired winter athletes. I didn't know any coming into this. Now I know like 2. Ilya. Truly. I knew Brian Boitano because I named my fish Brian Boitano because he was super glittery and looked like Brian Boitano because he was like sequency. I knew him, Nancy Kerrigan, Tanya Harding, Wayne Gretzky. Like I know the classic names, but my knowledge level is low. So asking your buyer, what do you think? What are the ripple effects? What's the impact? Or subjective terms, high, low, good, bad. Do you have a low blank? Do you have a high blank? Do you think that they had a tight turn? Do you think that their height jumping off the ice was high? I'm like, I don't know. Even if I tell you, and I believe that I do know, you have to keep in mind, if you're doing your job, that's the danger, is I believe that I do know when I'm wrong. So any kind of subjective terms, I would nix out. Okay, going to the next lap. We got 2 more laps left. 15 tips to ask on discovery. Oh, okay, good. It's just a more extended list. Okay, I'm going to keep going here. And then we're going to get into the last section on initial questions to ask. That one's going to be super fun. Okay, so I'm going to keep going here for rules. Anytime that you say the word if, you have to change and you have to turn it into a question. So if I were to say, if you're planning on going to Cortina, let me see if anyone can guess what's a way to turn that into a question. Instead of saying, if you're planning on going to Cortina, What's a way to turn that into a question? Or if you're planning on going to any outdoor sports, how could I turn that into a question? I'm going to see if anyone is in the chat, if y'all have given me the pleasure of staying on. I know that we were late today. So if questions are essentially you're working in the word if to any kind of explanation or any type of question, and you're broadcasting to them from a high level that you don't know some information and that's not important, you don't care that you don't know the information, that's irrelevant on your that's outside of your you don't need it to diagnose. Essentially, you're like, if you are planning to go to Italy this year, if you are planning to go to the ski jump, if you're, yada yada yada, if you have a like if you have a network latency that's higher than 200 milliseconds, if you X, Y, and Z, it just broadcasts to them, you are missing a data point, and that doesn't matter to you. It doesn't matter in terms of diagnosing accurately. It doesn't matter in terms of what your prescription is to the situation. So that's an if question. By the way, there's a lag on the line in terms of response time. So just know that there's a 30-second delay. Okay, rule number 7, you can never ask a question of buyer, oh, how will you get to the other sites? There you go. Okay, what do you want to see most? There you go. Of like, it's no question. It's no if in the question. Min, I was looking at something else. Was those two from J. Frank? If there was another one on the front end, then I missed it, just hypothetically. Have you ever driven in snow? There's an objective one, of like no if in that question. So there's an easy way to turn any kind of if question or any kind of if statement into a question or any kind of if question. Instead of saying, if you're planning on going to Cortina, just say, are you planning on going to Cortina? If you're planning on going to ski jumping, are you planning on going to ski jumping? If you're thinking about wearing, like, if you have more than 3 pairs of shoes, there you go. What's your current plan? Like, they're objective questions, even if you're after what they think. It's objective questions. Like, if hypothetically, if this woman had said to me, if you what's your current plan for driving along the steep cliffs when you're between Cortina and Predazzo, when you're going up the mountain? I'd have been like, crap, that's an example of a question that helps me understand I don't know something. Because I'm like, I don't have a plan. Should I have a plan? I don't know. There are mountains. Are there mountains? Am I really going to be driving through them? So that is value in and of itself. But even that question is an objective question. You'll notice, Kirsten was asking, what is your plan? Now that helps me know that I don't have one and that I likely should, but anytime I'm going to say the word if, and keep in mind, like I had to play around with this a lot, meaning I made the mistake a lot of like, I would start to say if, and I'm like, never mind, Beck. Say that, ask the question. So that's the next rule. You can never ask a buyer a question where you didn't need them to find the answer. So a great example of this one, and I see it almost every discovery call. They're like, where are you based? I'm like, Brendan, it's not over, but you're on the way there. All that question does is it communicates to them that you didn't look them up. So any kind of information I didn't need them for, meaning like company details, where they're based, what their role is, for example, anything that's online, the only thing that you communicate to them is not, every question you ask communicates something. Everything you say communicates something, or don't say communicate something. So if I didn't need them, best case scenario, it means I didn't look it up. Worst case scenario, it means I want them to say it out loud so that I can manipulate them. This is COI selling to me. I want them to say the cost of inaction out loud to manipulate them. I'm like, you can skip all the bullshit punchline. Like the math of how you justify this. You're trying to get them to say, oh my gosh, this math is really big. There's an impact of I'm losing $13 million. Like it reminds me of those, y'all are getting me on the weekend and after a drive, a stressful drive. So the real me is coming out. It reminds me of one of those Shazam ads or one of those like, wow with the sponge ads. oh my gosh, this is a huge puddle. Like they know what you're after. They know what you're after. And even if they don't, I feel bad for them and I'm scared for them. Of like you're trying to calculate all the costs of inaction to get them to say it out loud so they feel like they should buy more. Pain selling is the exact same thing. Current state versus future state selling is getting the information so you can be confident and hold your guts in pricing. But all of it comes from the same root. We are about us. And if it helps them, okay, that's great. So I can spit out a couple of lines about, my job is to help. I'm like, no, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. Not really. That's not the number one. And if it's not the number one, then it's nothing. Principles and morals, and they either mean everything or they mean nothing at all. And where that's proven to you and to people around you often is when it comes into question, of like at a point like this, when I'm asking in the hard times, that's when you find out what really matters to you. And all of those techniques, what really matters to us is us, so that I don't get negotiation and not have the justification for my pricing, so that I can send I'm confused emails, so that I can send these follow-up emails. It was like, but you said, it's like, that is not after helping them. It is not. So my goal always has to be, if my North Star is to help them, then it alleviates a lot. Not everything, because I still have to have the ability built on experience, learned information, mostly learned information and data, of like, do I know the statistics to be able to help this person? Does she know enough about cars to be able to help me? But the first step of it, of like, is the agenda changing. So that is the next rule of when you ask a buyer a question, you have to need the information. It can't be a show. It can't be you're asking them the question so that they say it out loud so they feel like they should do something more. That's where you know that it's manipulation. Okay, I'm just going to step off of it for a second. I'm getting rowdy. You can never end a discovery call without the buyer's goals in specific. I'll ask people a lot, I'm like, what's the problem? And they're like, they need this. I'm like, that's just a self-prescribed solution. What's the problem? They're like, they're having a lot of trouble with, I don't know, let's pick another one, with days sales outstanding. Most can't get there. And I'm being nice, I'll say 90 can't get there. But even if they did get there, if I double click and I'm like, well, how many days sales outstanding are they at right now? Like, well, I don't know. And then I'm like, then you don't know the problem. You don't know the size of the problem. That knowing the problem means knowing the size of it, because it means knowing all the things about it that are necessary to be able to solve it. Not only what they believe, but what you truly believe behind the curtain. So that's the next one. Anytime the buyer uses subjective terms, so I wouldn't use any subjective terms, meaning high, low, good, bad, ineffective, inefficient, slow, manual, blah, 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 any of the, whatever that means. A lot of data login points. I'm like, how many data login points? You can either ask them, how many do you have? Or if you have anything less than 10, if you're doing a cold email, for instance, if you do me a favor, X, Y, and Z, if you go back and check. So, but the second piece of that is anytime they use a subjective question or give you a subjective answer, I need to know the definition of it. An important point, you can't ask a buyer, well, you should never interrupt them. Even if you tie with them, I say, go ahead. I play dead fish to make them go, but especially near the beginning of the call, because they're going to be a little shocked that you're a seller that doesn't talk and that you're a seller that isn't after manipulating. So if they're going on a rant, I can't stop them. But a really helpful thing for me is I write notes during the whole discovery call. And on the right-hand side, I'm putting information I didn't know of like that I had a question about, so that when they take a breath, I'm like, out of all these questions, which is the next one that I need to ask that's the most important? It's not about, do I ask questions? It's about which one is the most important based on what they've said before. So if they say a problem, you have to abandon all. You have to double down there. But I have this list going, and it's one of the most helpful things. It's a small tactical item, but hear me out. Number one, it communicates to them that they should keep talking. So it's a natural way to get them to keep talking, especially they don't trust you, especially in the beginning. So they might be closed-lipped. So it's a good way to get them to start talking. Number two, it gives you a pillow of time to organize your thoughts whenever they do stop a sentence. To think, which one do I need to ask most? The third one is it helps you ask the most relevant question, not the most recent one that needs to be asked. So let's say they cover 10 data points and you're like, I need to really the question I need to know the most is the third one. But what they just finished with was something, let's say scale of 1 to 10, it was 1. A lot of times you'll end up answering or asking the most recent question as opposed to the most important one if you don't give this list. And then the last thing I'll say about this is because people will say, well, you have a recording software, why don't you just use that? And I'm like, first of all, no one does. Meaning there is no seller out there that watches all of their calls. There isn't. Like, come at me. You don't. Be real. You don't listen to all of them, right? You might listen to punchlines of some of them, blah, blah. But even if you did, that captures information, but it doesn't capture all of the information. So for instance, there's a lot of information of reading between the lines. If they're like, yeah, I really loved going to figure skating. Technically, it says they really liked going. But to anyone who's alive, they would say, I think that they're pissed about figure skating. Something's wrong. Of like, they'll say, hi, Lori. Lori, can you ping my mom and tell Mimi I'm safe, that I made it to Borneo. Tell her I'm safe. She was very, 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 which I get. I didn't even, Kirsten, for the record, I didn't even show her the pictures of the turns because I was like, Mimi's going to puke. She is a little bit of a micromanager, but it's all from love. But I was like, she was very, very, nervous, and she didn't even know about any of the scary hills. So Lori, if you could do that, it'd be really helpful. So you don't have to though. Anywho, yeah, in terms of having that running list, it helps me write down information of like, what was the summary of this? What do I think that they don't know? I can write down any hunches, or I can write down any things that I'm reading behind the line. If they're like, oh, my arm is killing me, then I'm like, okay, and then they keep moving on. I'm like, I need to write that data piece down. There's something really wrong with their arm. What I gather that from is the way they said it. But if they're like, man, my arm is killing me, I'm like, well, that's a joke. And I go right through that. So the point is, it's a short tip, but the impact of it is astounding, is take notes while they're talking. People would be like, well, why don't I go on mute? I'm like, no, don't go on mute. They're okay with you typing. It makes them feel better. It makes them feel better that at least even if you didn't get all the information, at least you cared enough to write some of it down, that it was important to you, just like the waiter. It's important to you to get everything right, of like, there's active listening, but then that's a whole nother level. That is important enough to you that you're scared that you'll miss something and you don't want to miss a thing. Okay, let's go into the next and last lap. So the last lap is initial questions to ask. This one I am going to be short about, and then we're going to close. How long are we at? 1:09. Okay, so the first two questions I wanted to lead off with, and then we're going to go really in depth, and not tomorrow, but the day after, in terms of the actual questions to ask, or the problem questions, impact questions. So we're going to go really meaty. But the first two I wanted to lead with is overview questions and driving impact questions, because they're the start of the call. Okay, so driving impact, again, is the only thing they can't be wrong about. It's the main reason, the main thing that they want to solve by changing. So there's a lot of types of impacts, which we went into in a session. I feel like I've lived in Italy my whole life in a good way, in a really good way. I'm Italiano. So point being, there's persona impact, there's horizontal impact, and there's vertical impact. And what an impact is what happens to someone what happens because the business problem exists. And again, the business problem is just the delta between the lagging indicator goal and achievement, because that exists. So CFO, it's gross profit margin's lagging indicator. The goal is 20% gross profit margin. That where they're at right now is 12%. So the business problem is 8% increase in gross profit margin. The impact is what happens because of that 8% delta. So there's 3 levels to it: persona, horizontal, and vertical. Persona is what happens to me in my department, my role, or what happens to me from a personal level at home because of this business problem exists. Vertical is how does it affect that delta affect my leaders, and horizontal is how does this affect the other departments. Any of them can be important. All of them are up for grabs in terms of where you can find an unknown. But the driving impact, by definition, is not an unknown. It is by definition unknown. And a driving impact is, out of all of these things, what is the number one thing? Why are they solving it? Out of all of these reasons, yeah, maybe it will affect my leader and it will affect my horizontal, but where I'm really, what I'm really after is, if I don't fix this 8% delta, I believe that I'm going to get fired, or I believe that I'm not going to get the promotion that I want to get from director of finance into CFO, for instance. So it's what happens, which of all these that exist is the main reason of why they're solving it. Now, I wouldn't suggest stopping there, meaning the goal of the exercise, a lot of it, is to find unknowns. So they always know the driving impact. By definition, it's what they're solving it for, to alleviate. But when you find these unknowns, you grow the size. It doesn't mean that, just because I solve this driving impact doesn't mean these other impacts doesn't matter. It means that this is the one that I have to solve, that I have to solve. And it's the one that was worth it, that made me start solving it. So that is a driving impact. The question to get to know it, and they might be shy. It depends on the situation. But a great way to find this is, so what brought you in today? I usually precursor it with a level of research, because it helps them bridge into more easily the impact. If they don't know you, if they think that you're after something, which they very likely do, and that's not to their advantage, they might start with, they're going to start lighter and they're going to start very vague. They're like, oh, well, I want cold email training services. So I want you to go through this, that, and the other, and start calling the shots in terms of what they want you to describe. So, but if I lead with a lot of research of so what I know is, thanks for meeting with me today, giving me the time today. So I know that you requested a demo. I looked a little bit about your company. It looks like you do real estate, and that it looks like you've been in your role for about the last year and a half. So I know that you came inbound, but what I don't really know is why. So don't mind me asking, what made you give me the time today, or what brought you in today? So this helps them cut through the fluff. I would say the more specific but short. You'll notice that didn't take a ton of time, but I just interrupted the pattern that they believe I don't know them. So I'm like, I listed what your company does. I listed how long you've been at the company. I've listed a couple of facts, and almost the goal of that is helping them understand I'm not like every other seller. You don't have to waste time on the basics. You have to show them that they don't have to waste time on the basics. Why? Because most sellers, they do. So you're like, this is all the stuff I know, which we should be researching anyway, but we have to be overt and prove that. This is all the stuff I know. What I don't know is what brought you in here today. That helps them shorten the time. A lot of times, I would say about 80% of the time, they'll just jump straight into the driving impact at that point. What you did was you sped up that process. They don't start describing all this cursory information because they know that you already know, and they're going to judge that based on what you have shown them, not what you say. So if I say, I know your company, it's not enough. I cannot tell you the percentage of time. I'm not going to tell you because it's going to make you sad. It makes me sad. The amount of sellers that I have heard on the line, what percentage that they'll say, so I researched your company, or they'll say, so I know that you had a call with blank, and they'll mention the SDR, and they'll be like, I took a listen to that. And then they'll double down, they'll ask a question, but it's very clear. They don't give any details about the call. And it's very clear by the question they ask that they didn't watch the call. So I'm like, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you see it, you have to mention details to show them instead of to prove to them essentially, and that helps them speed it up. But if you don't want to do any of that, the driving impact question that you can ask is, so what brought you in today? So again, if you don't do that first step, they will likely start with root cause. They'll start with, you know, a lot of times it's prescription, self-prescription, but root cause, tactical problem, they'll never start with business problem. Even if you lead that way, they'll start with driving impact, but they will not start with business problem because that's sensitive. And that's around their lagging indicator metric. And it's even though it's what they need to change to be able to avoid that driving impact, you have to keep in mind the higher that delta is, the more of a display of in their own mind, inadequacy at their role. That's sensitive. That's not fun to talk about. And it's certainly not fun to talk about with someone that I don't know. And I think it's just going to use it against me. So they'll never, in my experience, they'll never lead with business problem unless there's a lot of pre-existing context, but they'll likely go root cause. But I would say 60% of the time they're going to go to prescription because they're like, all right, just tell me about the product. Just give me the pricing because they don't know who you are. They don't know who you are and assume you're like every other seller. So that's driving impact questions is, you give them some context and you're like, so what, I know this, and this. What I don't know is why. So if you don't mind me asking, what brought you in today or what made you give me the time on the call today is how you can get them to go to driving impact. The second type of question that we're going to close is an overview question. An overview question is probably my favorite type of question because anytime you ask a question, you run the credit card, meaning it's a cost. If you should have known already, you run the credit card twice as much. If it's a leading question, then you run it 3 times as much. But it is a cost either way, an overview. But what you get in exchange for that is information. So the best types of questions, the ones that give you the most data and the most specific data that helps you diagnose the biggest unknown or as many unknowns as possible. That's what a good question is. So an overview question, why I like it is it's the cost of one question, but it'll give you 50 different data points if you do it correctly. So you're asking them to just give you an overview of they're like, no, let's say you get through the elevator pitch and they're like, no, well, we've been having a lot of problems in terms of network latency or server uptime recently. So I wanted to see what you hypothetically can do about that. Can you walk me through a little bit about your IT setup to date? And you can even give them some examples of to prove to them that you actually want this data for a very valid reason, of how much storage availability do you have? When did you buy that? How many backup tests do you do? What's the success rate of that? How's it been over time? And they'll usually, if right off the bat, if they don't know you, even if you ask an overview questions, they'll look a little tricky at you until you give them examples. Cause then they're like, number one, this person knows what those answers should be of 16 gold stars that you're like, I think it's a 190, anywhere from a 180 to a 200. But the second thing you're showing is my intent here is valid and it's to help you and it's to diagnose. It's not to manipulate you. So once they know that, then they start to lean in. So overview question is, if you don't mind me asking, can you walk me through a little bit about blank, and then they just go off. Last thing I'll say is some sellers will ask, well, what if they talk about information that I don't need? And I'm like, you are worrying about, it's kind of it reminds me of Dumb and Dumber. Well, what if when I'm wearing 3 pairs of gloves, my hands start to sweat? Like, Brennan, what we're worried about is that your fingers are going to fall off after frostbite from not having any gloves on. It's okay if they sweat a little. Meaning it's okay if they give you information that's irrelevant. The intent of it is that it gives you volume of information for the cost of one, and they'll throw a lot of things in there. I wouldn't worry about the fact that half of that information you don't need. Half of the information you did, though. So it gives you a lot of information, and it kind of gets them into the habit right off the bat. They're playing tough cop in the beginning, but they start to talk about something, and then they start talking about something else, and they lose themselves in talking about their setup, which is a good thing. It helps them exit that buyer seller, mentality fight thing more easily right off the bat. Okay, that is everything. Thanks so much for attending. Those are discovery questions, part 1. Parti uno, due. Look at that. That's Bormia. That's real. Is that not crazy? That's real. That's really real. So that's Bormio. I'm tuning out now. So I'm going to be going to slalom tomorrow, men's slalom, which is basically like downhill, but there's a whole bunch of turns. And I'm going to figure skating tomorrow night. So I'm going to be back in Milan, essentially, not tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll still be here for the actual session, but then I'm going to be in Milan from there on out. And I promise, from me to you, no late starts after that. I told men, once we get to Milan, it's basically like we're in Texas. Like, so no late start times after today. So I'm sorry about that. Thank you so much for everyone for tuning in. The thing that I was going to tell you that I forgot to tell you yesterday, but I'm excited to tell you, you're going to think I'm a snot. Jay Frank, you're going to think I'm a snot. Kirsten, if you're still online, you're going to think I'm a snot. I don't know why. I really don't know why. I am guessing because I registered with my Paris address, because I noticed something interesting when I registered for my Parisian for the Summer Olympics. So again, you pick a category and they assign you a ticket. You have no choice on where the ticket is. And so after I was front row for figure skating, I'm like, well, that's a luxury that I'll never get in. I don't even want to go. I was like, it's front row or nothing, which is obnoxious. I never thought in my lifetime I'd be in the front row. I'm like, I think they're just confused that like I'm a foreign dignitary or something. I don't know what makes them confused. But so I was talking to my parents and I just randomly clicked on my tickets for, I have two figure skating events on the back end, and I have 2 short track and speed track. And I clicked on one, clicked on the second one, and the third one, and the fourth one. For all 4 events, I am front row. Row 1. You know how annoying that is? I would want me dead. Like, for real. I don't know why, but they gave me, I'm assuming it's either one of 2 things. Either it's Europeans kind of take care of their own, which I love about them. They kind of take care of their own secretly. So, which ain't no shame or blame in that. So I think they're either confused that I'm a European because of the address, which I did it intentionally. Number one, because I was having like the souvenir. You can print off the souvenir tickets of like that. It shows it's a really pretty ticket, like really nice stuff if you want to frame it or whatever, put it on a wall. I have some from the Summer Olympics. I still haven't done anything with them. But point being, so you have to register an address for that. Of where to send them. And so I was like, I'm going to put my Parisian address, because for the opening ceremonies for the Summer Olympics, I had category C, which is like way down the Seine. And for whatever reason, I showed up and I was in category A for sure, straight across Eiffel Tower. And I'm like, and it was all French people around me. So the only thing I could guess is that they fast track French people. So I registered with that. And for whatever reason, I have 4 events coming up. Figure skating, women's freestyle and pairs, both finals, both primo events, and then short track and speed skating. And I'm front row for all of them. Anywho, I just want to tell y'all because it's the weekend. And, I thought, I'm like, they're going to be, it's just very interesting. I don't know how I got myself in this situation. That's amazing. Enjoy the good seat. Snoop Dogg will be behind. Yeah, I know. He'll be behind me. Yeah, that's right, Snoop. You're behind me. I'm French now. Take care of me first. I wonder if he'll be at this. So he wasn't at the figure skating event at the first one. I didn't see the one where Ilya fell. But so if I see him, I will take a picture. I mean, it's obnoxious. First row is first row. You're on the ice. My mom went back through the YouTube recording of Ilya, and she would pause it. She'd be like, "That's you," right above the skate girls who are really cute. But the ones that get stuff on the ice. That's it. Thanks so much for coming. What an obnoxious way to end. I will see y'all tomorrow. We are going to be on time, and we're going to pick up for the day in the life of an SDR. So when to send emails, when to, cold call. It'll probably be a shorter session, full disclosure, but a very logistical one of what to do when, kind of like the one we did with the AE, but just for prospecting. How can I arrange my day in the most effective way possible to hit quota? That's it. I'll see you tomorrow. So ciao for now. Arrivederci. And I hope everyone has a good rest of their day, of their Sunday. A domani. Okay, ciao.